Welcome to the training for the Texas Teacher Evaluation and Support System, or TTES. This is our Burleson ISD Teacher Overview. Our objectives today is that teachers will become familiar with the TTES process, begin to move from procedural to conceptual and understanding how the domains, dimensions, descriptors, and performance levels of the TTES rubric apply to their roles and responsibilities, and understand that the TTES process is based on best practices and an ongoing system of feedback and support. So, let's talk about what TTES is. It's a process, it's not an event. TTES is something that the state is planning to go public with in 1 to 2 years. That means that we are right now a pilot district. We have decided to pilot this program for the state, and in that regard, we are working with the state to give them our feedback on how things are going. That means that we are public learners. We are not TTES experts, but we will be once this finally gets rolled out. We're excited about participating in this and getting an opportunity to share our feedback with TEA. So let's talk about the Texas Teacher Standards. These are new, and this is what the TTES rubric has been all structured around. The standards identified in this section are performance standards to be used to inform the training, appraisal, and professional development of teachers. They have changed and they are new. Standard 1 is now instructional planning and delivery. Standard 2 is knowledge of students and student learning. Standard 3 is content knowledge and expertise. Standard 4 is the learning environment. Standard 5 is data-driven practice. And Standard 6 is professional practices and responsibilities. So let's talk about TTES. This is a little bit different because it's not what it will be this year. Now, going forward, and this is why we want you to see this slide, it's because we want to let you know what Texas's plan is eventually for TTES, but it's not what it is right now. Right now, your appraisal will be based off of the observations that you're having on TTES. But eventually, there will be 80% of it will be based on observations, both formal and informal, and 20% will be on student growth. Now, I know when you see student growth, you go, whoa, what are they looking at? Well, the truth is they're not sure what they're looking at yet. That is why, for right now, in the pilot districts, they are not including the student growth measure. But we do want to let you know that it might be there when this gets rolled out to the entire state. So it's something to think about, but not to stress over. So what are the requirements and what are the recommendations? This year, Burleson ISD has decided to go with the requirements. That is 1 observation for 45 minutes minimum. There is, we've decided there's no real requirement for announced versus unannounced, but what we've decided as a district is that we will have announced visits, and those visits will be for up to 1 week. So for example, the principal might say, I'm going to come and see you this week, sometime this week, and that will be announced. The post-conference has to happen within 10 business days, and the pre-conference we have decided is not optional. It is for the state, but for Burleson, the pre-conference is going to be required. Now, what will it be like in the future? The recommendations. Eventually what they want is that TTES is actually multiple observations, both formal and informal. I have to tell you, we really like this idea. What it means is that this is a second opportunity, and that eventually they will take both observations, and just like we do with grades, they will put those together and they will average them out to figure out what your final year progress will be. It also gives you an opportunity that if you've been working on something 1 year, you can go back and work on it in the next observation. So let's say in one observation they say, hey, we need you to work on communication. It gives you, the teacher, an opportunity to go back at that second observation and show them that you're really working on it. Another recommendation is that observations should be less in length, beginning, middle, and end, and that they would have 1 announced and 1 unannounced. Now, like I said, for this year, we're only doing 1 announced, but this may be where we move to in the future. That the post-conference happens within 48 hours and is in person, and that pre-conferences should take place for all announced observations. So let's talk about what we want to see in effective classrooms. In effective classrooms under the new T-test model, we want to see rigorous and measurable goals aligned to state content standards. We want to see student engagement and interaction. We want to see alignment of activities and materials throughout the lesson. We want to see student relevancy, and we want the teacher to display content knowledge, have numerous checks for mastery, and then we want the teacher to ask probing questions to extend learning, and evidence of student mastery of the objective as well as differentiation. When you look at this list, this is really well aligned to what we know is good teaching and good teaching practices and strategies. So let's talk about the T-test rubric. You will receive a copy of the T-test rubric. It's important for us that you have that so that you know exactly what's expected. They have broken down the T-test rubric into 4 sections, and you'll see this is different than the old PDOS rubric. It starts with planning, where we look at standards and alignment, data and assessment, knowledge of students, and activities. Then it moves into instruction, where it's achieving expectations, content, knowledge, and expertise, communication, differentiation, and how to monitor and adjust instruction. The next section is called the learning environment. And this is your classroom environment, routines and procedures, managing student behavior, setting that classroom culture. And finally, we have a piece that you will discuss with your principal in your end-of-year summative called professional practices and responsibilities. That is your professional demeanor and ethics, goal setting, professional development, and school community involvement. This is an example of what the T-test rubric will look like. It starts with a domain. The domain on this would be instruction. From there, there's a dimension. This is dimension 2.4. It says differentiation. Right here you'll see. Also know that here it gives you an example of what this is. For example, the teacher differentiates instruction, aligning methods and techniques to diverse student needs. The next thing is the descriptors. That really tells you what it means to be this teacher. And here you see your performance levels. Now I want to stop here for a moment because these performance levels are not what we were used to seeing on PDOS. They are different. And they are improvement needed, developing, proficient, accomplished, and distinguished. Now, in the trainings that your appraisers have received, they are told to start at the level of proficient. What you will see when you read the descriptors for proficient is that what used to be exceeds expectations is now really well aligned to proficient. And proficient is a rock solid teacher. So if you're scoring proficient, that is rock solid. Also, I want to explain to you that the way you will receive a ranking on this is that your appraiser will look at these individual descriptors and they will decide on these individual descriptors which one best describes what they saw in the classroom. And they're looking for a preponderance of evidence. That means if you have 3 here in the proficient range and 1 in developing, because the preponderance of evidence is in proficient, they will score you a proficient. You do not have to hit each of the bullets, each of the descriptors, but you do have to have a preponderance of evidence. And we really want to let you know that that proficient teacher is really going to be rock solid. So they've been told start at proficient and work your way up or down based on where we go. But we always look at proficient first. So like we said, these are the 4 areas that we're looking at: planning, instruction, and learning environment, and professional practices and responsibilities. The top 3 are what your principal will be looking at through observations. Here is just another example of this. This is instruction, and you'll see again, this might be communication. It's another sample of what's going on. And it will tell you exactly what they want. For example, in communication, a proficient teacher uses probing questions to clarify and elaborate learning. They recognize possible student misunderstandings and respond with an array of teaching techniques. They ask, remember, understand, and apply level questions. They provide clear explanations that are clear. They use verbal and written communication that is clear and correct, and they establish classroom practices that provide opportunities for most students to communicate effectively with a teacher. Now, the difference between this and accomplished is that they ask questions. Look right here. You'll see these subtle differences. They want you to ask questions too, but these questions at the creative, evaluative, or analysis levels that focus on the objective and provoke thought and discussion. So it's bumping up that rigor a little bit. You'll see this as you look through here. I also want to let you know you will receive a copy and have available to you within this a copy of this rubric. So if it's something you want to look at ahead of time, what I believe I would do as a teacher is look at this rubric ahead of time, and then when I have my pre-conference with my principal, if there's any area that I'm unsure about or that I think, I don't know that I'm doing that, where do you see me? I would sit down and go through it. The great thing about T-Test is it is really based on a rubric, and the rubric is not hidden. You know exactly what will be expected. So you might ask, when a principal or my appraiser comes to my classroom, what are they looking for? Well, they have really done a lot of training on capturing unbiased notes of what occurs during a classroom lesson. And that means they've been told to script what the teacher says, what the teacher does, what the students say, and what the students do. They've also been told to copy wording from visuals used during the lesson and to record time segments of the lesson. This collection of detailed evidence is essential for the observation process to be implemented accurately, fairly, and for the intended purposes of the process. So when do you collect evidence? Prior to the lesson being observed, you will have a pre-conference. A pre-conference will be a review of the lesson or unit plans. This will be a sit down with your appraiser. It should take about 15-20 minutes. And this is an opportunity for you to ask as many questions as you want to before heading in. Let's say there's something you want them to know about the classroom makeup, something you've been working on. This is your chance to discuss that. Then during the lesson, they will script what the teacher says and does and what the students say and do. And then after the lesson, you will actually have a formal sit down again with your appraiser to communicate between the classroom observation and post-conference and to let them know what they saw. Now, eventually, this is the evaluation cycle. This year, remember, we are in the announce stage, so you will have a pre-conference to an observation to a post-conference. That will be required. Now, next year or years coming up, if we also have an unannounced visit, of course, that would just be the observation and the post-conference. So the purpose of the pre-conference is to provide the teacher with an opportunity to share his or her thought process in developing the lesson plan and provide additional details about the upcoming observation, to clarify expectations for teacher and student performance, and to provide the appraiser with the information about the lesson observation and criteria that may not be directly observable. And this is how the post-conference will work. They've actually given us a layout. You have an introduction, then a greeting. Hi, how are you? They'll review this process with you, and then they'll ask you a general impression question about the lesson. Then they're going to find an area that you did well on, a reinforcement area. They're going to tell you what that dimension is. They're going to ask you some follow-up questions, and they're going to share their evidence for why they picked that. They will also have a refinement piece, where they will talk to you about an area that they want you to work on, a refinement area. They'll do a self-analysis and follow-up questions. They will share their evidence for why they picked that as refinement, and then they'll share recommendations with you. Then you'll review the ratings, and they'll share the evidence for the ratings. This is how they have to structure that post-conference, just so you know. But this is great, and it gives you an idea of what to work on, the good things that you're doing great, but the other areas you need to work on. Remember, we're all working. We're all getting better, and T-Test really lends itself to that type of growth. So our objectives for this were that the teachers will become familiar with the T-Test process, begin to move forward from procedural to conceptual in understanding how the domains, dimensions, descriptors, and performance levels of the T-Test rubric apply, and understand that the T-Test process is based on best practices and an ongoing system of feedback and support. Remember, great teaching is at the core of every quality education system. Research shows there's no greater in-school factor than having an outstanding education in the classroom. T-Test was developed by educators for educators. It's aligned to research-based best practices. The rubric aligns directly with the new Texas teacher standards, and T-Test provides for actionable, timely feedback, allowing teachers to set goals and identify professional development that will lead to refinement in knowledge and skills. Remember, the proficient performance level is a representative of a rock-solid teacher. And remember, the ultimate outcome is improved student achievement.